All right. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Morning, everyone. Morning. Nice, man. Thank you for joining us again. Welcome to the release of the first quarter Business and Consumer Confidence Indices. A happy partnership between the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce and GK Capital Management Limited. Welcome to the persons joining us online. We're always happy to have you and to have your active participation and support. So, the main topic today clearly will be the release of the first quarter 2025 Business and Consumer Confidence Indices. At our last release, which was in January, representing the fourth quarter of 2024, we saw that business confidence surged an increase of 12.9% quarter over quarter and a year-on-year increase of 7.3%. That's on business. On the consumer side, quarter over quarter was about 4% up in the last quarter. But it was relatively flat year over year, 23 to 24. So we'll see what happens this quarter. Special recognition again to our sponsors, GK Capital Management Limited, and to our presenter from GK Capital, Chanel Simpson, Head of Private Wealth and Institutional Services. And of course, we also welcome Mr. Don Anderson, Executive Chairman, Markets Research Services Limited. And to our specially invited and very experienced panel today, we have Mr. Peter McConnell, Managing Director of Tradewind Citrus, Ms. Alicia Bogues, Head of Regional Development at the CB Group, and David Cromewing, Operations Executive, GK Foods and Services, Manufacturing Division. Looking forward to the discussion on sustainability in the manufacturing sector, climate resilience, and its effect on business and consumer confidence. After the presentations, we will take questions through the chat room in the time we have. And we ask the persons online to, if they have any questions, to put them in the Q&A. And you can direct the questions to a specific panelist or a general question. But we'll try to get through the meat of the presentations as quickly as possible to leave 10 or 15 minutes at the end so we can have a feedback from our audience. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Ms. Chanel Simpson, Head of Wealth and Institutional Services at GK Capital, to present the sponsor's remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the panel this morning, other esteemed colleagues, members of the media, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. As agriculture and food systems play foundational roles in human survival and economic growth, providing essential resources for daily life, building supply chain resilience now to withstand shocks is critical for Jamaica's future. In a time where tariffs and trade wars are no longer just buzzwords, extracting value from our partners, ports, and network ensures economic viability. Each year, with rising costs that impact not only producers but consumers, there is a growing understanding that more must be done to add longevity to the agriculture. We must make more informed choices, integrate more data and technology, and above all else, practice more sustainability in the field to ensure our next generation has something to look forward to. Recently, the government of Jamaica announced its desire to support the sector for a stronger, more food-secure Jamaica. There are talks of strengthening resilience through more climate-smart technologies, irrigation systems, as well as the aim to continue to organize around disaster preparedness. We must act now, and here is why. In last year, 2024, the agricultural sector faced compounding challenges from climate change events, economic instability, and geopolitical tensions. Rising input costs and unpredictable weather patterns tested our farmers' resilience. Globally, these challenges sparked innovation, driving sustainable practices and technological breakthroughs. These moves from our colleagues in other regions highlight innovation's pivotal role in sustaining humanity and addressing the growing pressures on our food systems. In the last Atlantic hurricane season, over 4.73 billion in losses were recorded affecting our farmers, some of whom were covered by our sister company, GK General Insurance, but others were not. It begs the question, are we doing enough to protect our farmers against environmental shocks, and what can we do before the next wave happens? Our panel of experts today will share their insights on best practices to build resilience. At GK Capital Management, our investment banking team is poised to assist companies with capital who are ready to invest in their sustainable future and build resilience now. As tensions grow both in the economy and the earth, it's time to make the necessary steps needed to bolster our food security, enhance our trades, and do good for the generations to come. We are ready to support the efforts of companies that believe in a resilient future. As title sponsors of the JCC Business Consumer Confidence, we are eager to learn of today's findings and discussions from our panel. As we discuss what's best for our country, we encourage you to think deeply on how you invest your funds and making us your financial partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Chanel. I want to welcome my colleagues from the Chamber, CEO Larry Watson, Vice Presidents Emil Leiber and Martha Miller, and of course, Past President Ianita. Thank you for joining us today. All right, we'll go right into it now, and we'll ask Executive Chairman of Market Research Services, Mr. Don Anderson, to present to us the summary of the first quarter 2025 Business and Consumer Confidence Indices results. Please welcome Don.
Thank you very much, Andre. Good morning, everybody. Very good to see you all. Some of you returning, some of you for the first time. Thank you very much. It is a real pleasure for us at Market Research Services Limited to be working along with the Chamber in this presentation. There's a lot of data, as Andre normally says, to unpack. And therefore, I'm going to go straight into the presentation, give you a little bit of background, first of all, which is very important to contextualize the information that you'll be hearing. So we started working on this study 2001. This was the initial quarter for the Business and Consumer Confidence study. And therefore, we have amassed over 90 quarters of data. This last quarter, therefore, represents the first quarter for 2025. We interviewed over 600 consumers in a nationally representative sample and over 100 businesses in a sample that reflected the various industry types in the country. So we have a pretty good basis from which we can project up to the total population of businesses and of individuals. So this is the January to March period. And it's very interesting that every time we present data, we eagerly look forward to the next quarter. The last quarter clearly had data which indicated that the business confidence shot up spectacularly. We have good news and we have not so good news in this particular quarter, but we'll start with the good news. And the first indication is that, let's see if this works well. Right, here we are. So we're going to be dealing first off with the consumer confidence. Over 600 persons interviewed in a nationally representative sample, and that gave us the statistical reliability to project up to the total population. For the first quarter of 2025, we saw consumer confidence reaching an all-time high. It moved up by 5 percentage points, and the index was 183.7, which represents the highest in the history of the business and consumer confidence study. The previous peak was just prior to COVID, when it was 183.4. And therefore, what we're seeing is has been a gradual increase in consumer confidence. We can see that chart, which talks to you in terms of dips, yes, but a gradual and progressive increase in consumer confidence up to now, where it is now peaking at 183.7. So, let's see if this, okay, here we are. Let's back up a little bit. All right, so consumer confidence at 183.7, it indicates that consumers are at this point in time pretty confident about their situation, and it represents a progression of positive increases over the last 4 years. Pre-COVID was 183.4, this is 183.7. I just want to restate that for emphasis. We're broken it down into a 5-year trend, clearly, and we're looking at the Kingston area, the tourist area, and we can see that what is driving that largely is confidence amongst consumers in tourist-related industrial and tourist-related businesses and tourist-related areas. Less so in Kingston, and obviously less so in areas outside of Kingston. So we've broken down this confidence index over the last 5 years and indicate where has been the primary area of confidence, and it is amongst consumers who are somewhere along the line related to the tourist sector. Okay? So let's look first of all at how consumers feel about businesses. Current business. There has been amongst the consumers and all the indices that factor and that drive the overall consumer confidence, there has been a positive movement. So if we look at how consumers feel about current businesses now, we can see represented by the chart or the block in the middle that in quarter 1 of 2025, 20.5% of the consumers that we interviewed said that current business conditions were good. 69% said it was average. But when you compare that to fourth quarter of 2024, we can see that's a significant movement from 17.9 up to 20.5, but even more so when you compare it to the first quarter of 2024, which was 16% of the consumers who felt that current business conditions were good. So it's a positive step forward, and one of the key factors that have contributed to the increase in consumer confidence. We look at this particular situation and we want to make the point that consumers have never ever felt that jobs were plentiful. Never ever. We can see that from that top bar, 10% first quarter 2024, 11% in first quarter 2025, 11.5% in fourth quarter of 2024. So consumers generally have never felt that jobs have been plentiful. Significant percentage think it's adequate. But even here, we can see where 45.8% of the consumers in the first quarter of 2025 feel that jobs are adequate. 43.1% in the fourth quarter. So again, that's a movement of 2 percentage points, 2.7 percentage points between quarter to quarter, fourth quarter 2024 to first quarter 2025. And it, of course, compares positively with the first quarter of 2024, where 42.6% thought that jobs are adequate. But of course, we can look at the other block down the bottom, and consumers generally have felt that jobs are in short supply. All right? So where does this confidence come from? We just looked at current business conditions. We're now going to shift our attention to expected. What do you expect to happen in the future? 39.2% of the consumers feel that business conditions are going to get better, as against 33.3% in the fourth quarter of 2024. So there's a good 6 percentage point increase. And also, of course, a better position when you compare that to first quarter of 2024. So generally, consumers are buoyant. What about jobs? Here again, the situation is a bit of a damper because 35.1% said we believe that the job situation is going to get better, but 48.2% don't see any change, and 17% believe that it's going to get worse. So that they aren't overly optimistic about their own job situation, and therefore we ask the question again, where is this buoyancy coming from? What about changes in household income? 58.9%, and this is the largest single increase. 58.9% say in the first quarter that they expect their household income to change. 59% compared to 51% in the last quarter of 2024 and 50% in the corresponding quarter, first quarter of 2024. So there's been the largest single jump. They expect their household income to increase significantly. But again, we say, well, where is this change coming from? Because they don't see jobs coming forward. They don't see jobs improving. They don't see a significant improvement in the number and supply of jobs. So where is it coming from? Well, how is this affecting purchase plans? We note that there's also been an increase that they're going to have more income, and therefore 16.2% said they plan to purchase a home, which is more than it was in the fourth quarter of 2024, 13.2%, and also significantly more than that 14.9% in the first quarter. Not significantly more, but certainly close to 2 percentage points more. So that there is a certain amount of buoyancy, and the plan to purchase incidence is higher, particularly for homes and for vehicles. What about vacations? And the point we're discussing probably just around the table was that the lowest incidence of movement is amongst vacations, because prior to say third quarter, fourth quarter of 2024, the vacation incidence was higher. The intention to take a vacation was highest amongst the three purchase incidents. Here the situation is that 41.1%, which is a downer on the fourth quarter of 2024, say that they intend to take a vacation. It's still a largest single purchase intent, but it hasn't moved upwards in line with the improvement in consumer confidence. And it is worthy to note, even if the percentages are relatively small. So moving right along, we have a situation where some persons felt the economy was going to be better. Some people feel that the economy is going to get worse. We look first of all at those who believe the conditions are going to get better in the next 12 months. In the fourth quarter of 2024, that incidence was 31.3%. And in the first quarter, 32.4% said they believe that business conditions are going to get better. So it's a marginal improvement. What are the top reasons advocated or put forward? Consumers are just being optimistic. Again, they're not putting their optimism, their hope and expectation on anything concrete necessarily, but they believe that it's going to get better. Some consumers say the economy is showing signs of improvement. There's been some growth in some sectors, and we drill that down, and we know that tourism is the one that they've identified, basically. Entrepreneurship is on the rise. Investors are showing interest. And fifthly, more new businesses coming. I want to pause and interject. When we drill down and we looked at the data in terms of age and socioeconomic profiles and demographic units, so to speak, we're finding that there's a growing incidence of entrepreneurship. And therefore, people aren't necessarily relying upon the state to create jobs or businesses to create jobs. The people are now actually going out and identifying businesses that they can go into. And therefore, there is a noticeable increase in the incidence of entrepreneurship, which is feeding into this confidence. Very important factor to note. But we have, happily, fewer persons who believe the economy is going to get worse. 29.1% in the fourth quarter of 2024 believed the economy was going to get worse, and that number dipped to 27.4%. So it corresponds with a growing confidence of consumers at this point in time, as reflected in the first quarter of 2025. So what are the reasons why people believe the economy is going to get worse? Bear in mind that fewer persons in this first quarter believe the economy is going to get worse than in the fourth quarter of 2024. Well, the first thing they point, and these are all verbatim, unsolicited responses. So what we do, we ask, well, why do you say the economy is going to get worse? And we leave it open-ended. People volunteer their comments and we trapped it, put them into categories, and here's what is being reflected. Government not doing enough. Lack of employment. Well, people are saying jobs are not plentiful. Some people are saying jobs are scarce. Lack of employment. Increase in crime. Increase in crime, you may ask, because the information is that crime is down, murders are down. Consumers are saying that's one of the problems why we believe. But remember, this is sectored into those who believe that the economy is going to get worse. This is not the overall pattern, but this is those who say the situation is going to get worse. Crime is a factor. Unstable foreign exchange. And fifthly, businesses struggling to keep up. So whilst they say, well, whilst on the one hand they say businesses are looking like they're picking up and doing better, and we are, reposing some confidence in our ability to increase our household income, some people are still saying that businesses are struggling, and that is one of the reasons they believe that the economy is going to get worse. One of the drivers, of course, of how consumers feel about themselves is the price they have to pay compared to, say, last year. And this data is very consistent over the last 6 or so quarters that we've been tracking this. The large majority of persons who we interviewed say prices are increasing significantly. Some people say moderately, but the largest single factor, 3 out of every 4 persons we interviewed say that prices are increasing significantly. It's a major factor in people's ability to meet their daily household sort of expenditure. Very few people think prices have remained the same, 3%, and 1% say it has decreased moderately. We don't know where they are, but that 1% is really negligible. All right, it really is negligible. So we ask this question, and the bar that sticks out like a sore thumb every time is crime and violence. 56% say that the most critical issue to address urgently, crime and violence. We note, however, that it's 6% less than the last quarter. So that's, again, maybe a reflection on the messaging which has been coming across that crime is down. But still, it is the largest single factor. More than the majority of persons we interviewed say that crime and violence is the most critical issue that needs to be addressed urgently. Unemployment, 13%. And so on. And we have a range of them down to 1% political squabbles, which is, again, pretty negligible, but we note all of them down to, and there are probably a couple others that we are bunched into that 6%, which are all less than 1% by themselves. So how do you feel about the crime situation going forward? We know that 51% of the persons that we interviewed believe that it's going to get worse, right? This is their perception. This is, for them, the reality. 21% think that it's going to improve, and therefore that will be in line with those persons who have accepted the narrative that crime is down. And 28% say it's going to stay the same. Not a welcoming piece of statistic. What do you think should be done to address the crime and violence issue in the country? More jobs to young people. So they're citing here a correlation between young people and crime. 33% program for the unemployed. So crime, unemployment, feeding crime. Jobs, unavailability of jobs, and particularly for the young persons are 2 of the key factors they believe that should be addressed in order to effect a reduction in the level of crime. Better paying jobs for youths. So the youths are featuring very much in their perception as to what could, in fact, ease this problem of criminality. Better policing, clamp down on corruption, more stringent penalties and fines for crimes, bring back capital punishment. All of those, of course, add to more than 100% because people are able to give us more than one answer. So there's a multiple response question, and therefore it adds back to more than 100. So this prioritizes the kinds of solutions that they have advocated. We can look at the changes, which are all pretty negligible, but those are the factors that have been pretty consistent over the last couple of quarters that we have looked at it. We've asked persons about certain sectors, the police, small business, government, health services, roadways, etc. which sector you think will improve in the next, in the next 12 months? And we can look at the key one here, the education sector. And I think this is pretty consistent because we noted it's down by 1 percentage point over the last quarter. It was the predominant factor. It was the largest incidence of mentions. Here again, it is the same thing. 42% believe that the sector that will improve really in the next 12 months is the education sector, 42%, followed by the small business sector, 36%, and the power supply, electricity system, 35%. So that tells you really where people expect changes to take place positively, and we kind of rank them and compare them quarter to quarter. Education sector, small business sector, and the electricity supply, power supply situation. What are you going to rely upon? There's hardly any change in this. Mobile devices, this is where everybody is going. Use of mobile devices, whether tablets, smartphones, online banking, of course, is becoming more and more a factor in consumers' life, in the public life. Online shopping, of course, and we can see exactly where people are focusing and the kinds of things that people will be relying upon more and more in the future. Hardly any change over the last couple of quarters. So we want to, this particular quarter, we are looking at the agricultural sector. We're focusing on the agricultural sector. We've pulled out a couple of issues and talked to people about their impression of the agricultural sector, and this is what we're going to be tackling right now. A little less than half of the public believe that current agricultural practices have a positive impact on climate change. This is from the consumer's perspective, and we will see what the businesses feel, which I should mention right up front is not in line with this. Just under a third of the public believe that current agricultural practices have no impact on climate change, whereas just over a quarter believe that the current agricultural practices have a negative impact on climate change. So people did respond to us about climate change, and we have their perspective here. The largest single factor is that 42% of the consumers who believe that current agricultural practices have a positive impact on climate change, but 26% believe it has a negative impact, differential of 16% positive. How ready are Jamaican farmers to adopt environmentally sustainable practices? The largest single factor is that 44% who says they believe that they're somewhat equipped, and that 8% who believe they're very well equipped. And therefore, we want to bunch them together. And so the majority believe that somewhere along the line, Jamaican farmers are, in fact, ready and can adopt environmentally sustainable practices. So that's the largest factor. But we look at that 34% who said they're not really equipped. I mean, to some extent they are, but 14% who are definitely saying we don't believe that they are equipped at all. So this is a positive where more people think that Jamaican farmers are ready to adopt environmentally sustainable practices. But are you willing to pay higher prices for produce made using environmentally friendly practices? 47% said no, not surprisingly, because already they're saying, you know, we're burdened by high prices generally. And almost everybody says prices have gone up over the last year. And therefore, 47% of the people that we interviewed, of that 630 persons thereabouts, said we're not prepared to pay higher for produce made using environmentally friendly practices. But 34% said yes. So there is an opportunity, there is an option, there is an opportunity. 19% said maybe. So with good marketing, they could be convinced. But the largest single factor here is almost half of the persons we interviewed who say, no, we're not prepared to pay higher prices for produce made using environmentally friendly practices. So that 34% who said, yeah, we would be willing to pay more, we asked them, why would you be willing to pay more? Because we want to drill down into what kind of messaging could be used to impact their whole purchase decisions. 49% said, we believe these products would be healthier and would be better. 12% simply said it would be better for the environment. 10% said we need and we will benefit from these products. It is worth the value you get. You know, sometimes you get counterintuitive answers. Cost of living is always rising. So they say, well, you know, okay, cost of living is going to rise, but I'll be prepared to pay for the increased cost of getting environmentally friendly products. And these are the key reasons. The most important one is that persons are convinced that they will be getting better products when farmers use environmentally sound practices. But we also look at the other side. Almost half, 47% of the public are not willing to pay more for produce made using environment. Why? Prices are already too high. So, well, you know, we're already burdened by high prices. Why should we pay more for environmentally friendly products? 28% said we can't afford it. And those are the two largest single factors, simply a question of their ability to pay. So, do you believe that sufficient efforts are being made to support farmers to adopt environmentally friendly practices? 20% said yes, but 45% said no. So again, we need to, and again, counterbalance that against the data that we had just now, that there's a third of the persons we interviewed are prepared to buy products that are made through these practices that are environmentally friendly. 20% don't believe, however, 20% believe that sufficient efforts are being made, but 45% do not believe that sufficient efforts are being made to support farmers in this regard. So again, there's an opportunity because there is a willingness to buy. Okay, it's only a third at the moment in compared to 40% who say they aren't prepared to buy, but there's an opportunity, there's a window which is being opened for, again, support for farmers to use environmentally friendly practices. Would you like to learn about farming and agriculture as a potential? We have kind of grown up over the last 30 years believing that there is a kind of resistance, a kind of, sentiment against going into agriculture. This is counter to that because a significant percentage of the persons we interviewed, 66% to be exact, say they have varying degrees of interest in learning about farming and agriculture as a potential business career opportunity. This is a pretty important, interesting piece of data. The rest aren't interested, 33%, but 66%. Two out of every three persons we interviewed said that, I'd be keen to learn more about farming or agriculture as a potential business or career opportunity. So again, there's another window opening and we can see the pathway going to driving agriculture as a career, as a business opportunity. We look at remittances, a very important piece of data. Every time I make this presentation, just to contextualize why we're looking at this, is that up to about 2011, remember we started to do this study from 2001. Every quarter, I think we probably missed about 200, maybe just about 2 quarters because of reasons unforeseen circumstances. So we're about 90 quarters of data, but around about 2011 to thereabout, we were looking at some data which we couldn't quite understand. The purchase intent was way outside the remit of a person's ability based on what we were seeing. And therefore, the wisdom of the chamber decided, let's look at remittances. So we've been tracking this from 2012. And that has been revealing because what it has shown is that remittances play a very, very important part in shoring up the livelihood of a significant percentage of Jamaicans. So we can see from 2012 up to 2020, COVID, that over a third of all Jamaican households received remittances. Since COVID, again, obvious reasons, that has fallen. In the last quarter, the first quarter, the only data we have, which is stacking up against 2024, that fell to 27 percentage points. If that holds, then we'll have a fall in remittance inflows, or not inflows so much as the incidence of persons receiving remittances. So it's worthy of note because it means that there's been greater pressure on the disposable dollar amongst persons earning money in Jamaica. That's basically what this says. So it's very interesting to watch this pattern. Clearly, we get a lot of the money we get from the more established economies of the world, the United States and Canada, in that order. And therefore, when COVID hit, it impacted the ability of Jamaicans to send money to Jamaica. And that was really the key factor for that reduction in the inflows by demographics. But we're not talking about the actual dollar value of the remittances, although Bank of Jamaica has confirmed that there has been a fall in the incidence of remittances coming in. So let's just sum up what we learned from the consumer confidence study. That consumer confidence has risen by 5 percentage points from 175 in the fourth quarter of 2024 up to 183.7. That's the index in the first quarter of 2025, a 5%. Strong confidence in the tourism sector pushes index to a record high. What are the key factors influencing that? We can see current business conditions, current job situations, expected business conditions, expected job situation, and expected personal finances. So people are expecting to earn more money, but we make the point, and we make the point quite clearly, that they're not seeing jobs being created to the extent that would impact their whole household income, and that where we're finding the change is that people are becoming more entrepreneurial in their spirit, and this is where they're seeing they're depending on their own ability to earn money rather than depending on businesses to provide them with jobs, because jobs have never been plentiful, and based on what they're seeing, there's not going to be a major shift in that supply that would significantly impact their household income. So they're going to be where the pattern is, a greater entrepreneurial venturing, which is important to note. And that has impacted the purchase intent up this quarter, and that is the second consecutive quarter of positive change in consumer confidence. All right? So that takes care of the consumer segment, and we want to now move to the business segment. I don't control this particular part. Yes, here we are. What has happened in business? Now remember that when I stood at this particular platform in the January reporting on the fourth quarter of 2024, there was an amazing positive change in business confidence. It shot up by 12 percentage points. 12 percentage points. So we can see that reflected in the last quarter, last part of that chart. But in the first quarter of 2025, business confidence went back to its leveler. It fell by 11 percentage points and therefore moved back down to 132.5 from a position of about 149 index in the fourth quarter of 2024. So it has come back. Now we were speculating in January period when we reported on the significant increase that there was a whole heap of hype surrounding that Christmas period, that a number of things that had taken place that had pushed business confidence up by 12 percentage points, and we were anxious to see what this first quarter data would show. First quarter data has shown that that confidence is down by 11 percentage points, so it is back almost to what it was pre the fourth quarter of 2024. So that's more like the pattern, the trend has been more in line with 132, 133, 134, and therefore, if you wish, that fourth quarter is an outlier. It went up to 149% thereabouts. Just falling back. And we're going to see what are the drivers of this kind of negative change. So here we see the trend in business confidence. Prior to COVID, it was at 137 at 2022. At COVID was 2020. We can see it still moved up to 124.9 in 2021 despite COVID, up to 137 in 2022 when we began to push COVID back, up to 139 in 2023, dipped a little bit overall 24. Despite that significant spike in the last quarter, we note that the business confidence was less in 2024 than it was in 2023. We need to take note of that. I know that there's a lot that been said about that 12 percentage point increase in the last quarter, but we need to counterbalance that and, in a way, contextualize it. When we look at the fourth quarter of 12 percentage point increase, that still did not push the business confidence be above the 2023 period. It, in fact, fell by 1 percentage point. First quarter of 2025, business confidence is falling back to 132.5. And we don't know what the next 3 quarters are going to look like. We're now currently in the field, conducting interviews, getting information from the business sector as to how they currently feel about their businesses. But the drivers, the real drivers of business confidence, we're going to look at, and we're going to see that in every one of the indices every one of them that contributes to the overall, there has been a decline. Current profitability. The positive reading is really at the top, better than expected. In the fourth quarter of 2024, 25.2% of the businesses felt that their profit was better than expected. That fell to 16.4% in the first quarter of 2025. So in a way, there's a reality check. 18%, and that compares to 18% in the first quarter of 2024. So it is down against first quarter, it is down against last quarter of 2024. 67% in the first quarter of 2024 said their business profit was as expected. In the first quarter of 2025, that's down to 57.2%. Marginally better than the fourth quarter of 2024. So depending on how you want to look at it, this could be a positive takeaway. But the overall factor that we like to look at is when people say that profits are better than expected, and that, of course, feeds into the more positive kind of assessment of the situation. 16.4% compared to 25.2%. That's a dramatic fall off in expectations for profits. Is this a good time to invest? In the fourth quarter of 2024, 68.5% of the businesses said it was a good time to invest. That fell to 55% in the first quarter of 2025. Now you may contend and take comfort in the fact that the majority of the firms that we interviewed think it's a good time to invest. So that's a positive. But we need to stack it against, measurable trends, and that 55% reflects a 13 percentage point fall off in the incidence of businesses that feel it's a good time to invest. But overall, the majority still believe it's a good time to invest, and that cannot be ignored. Is it a bad time to invest? Well, that middle bar talks to how businesses feel about the current situation now. 26.4% say it's a bad time to invest compared to 19.8% in the fourth quarter and 20% in the first quarter. So that's a significant percentage increase in the incidence of companies, businesses that believe it's a bad time to invest. And, well, some don't know. So worthy of note that significant push, that spike that took place in the first quarter or the last quarter of 2024 is no longer current. The pattern is changing. It's changing. We haven't said, or we should say has changed, because it's changing would reflect a trend which we don't have yet. What about firms' finance? Do you expect it to improve? 63.6% said yes, we expect it to improve, but it's down from 78.4% in the fourth quarter of 2024. And obviously substantially down on the 71.7% in the first quarter of 2024. So again, this is not a thing that we need to be happy about. Businesses are not as buoyant, as positive as they were in the period during any of the quarters in 2024 at the moment. So do you expect your profits to improve? 60.7% said yes, compared to 75.7% in the fourth quarter. And again, this is something that worthy of note. So that businesses are kind of depressed in their thinking right now. But when we say that, we need to note that it's still a very strong positive in terms of the number of businesses that feel the situation will improve. It is just less than it was before, but it is still a strong positive. What about the economy? The top bar represents those businesses that believe the economy is going to get better, and that is down to 40% in the first quarter of 2025 compared to 50% in the fourth quarter of 2024. So whatever the wins are, and one very important factor that has taken place between then and now, of course, is the taking of office of the new President of the United States. What impact? We don't have a direct correlation to measure it, but the sort of argument and anecdotal evidence is that perhaps this is a factor that is driving this kind of sentiment. The economy, 40% they believe the economy is going to get better, which is not a bad number, but it does pale in comparison to that 50% a quarter before. So this is the first quarter reflecting upon all that has taken place globally during January, February, and March. Okay. So we have 40% of the businesses that we interviewed who believe that conditions are going to get better in the next 12 months. It's a pretty high number still, but of course down from that 50% a quarter before. So what are their reasons? What are they thinking? The economy is recovering. Good. Government policies. Optimism. So like the consumers, this is not a concrete basis. They're just optimistic. They believe that things are going to get better, but they couldn't point to anything in particular compared to the mention of government policies and the economy recovering. Resilience of Jamaicans. And this is coming through in just about all the data that we're looking at over the last couple of months and years, that the Jamaican consumer and the Jamaican businesses are all very resilient. They will weather the storm and try to bounce back. That came up very heavily when we looked at when we sort of made these presentations during COVID, where despite all the challenges that were being faced, businesses were saying, boy, Jamaicans are resilient. We're going to bounce back. It's going to take us a while. We don't know how long, but we're going to bounce back. And some sectors will improve the economy. So these are the top 5 reasons why businesses believe that the economy is going to get better in the next 12 months. Note, of course, that we have 16% who believe the economy is going to get worse, right? These are businesses. And we ask them the same question, well, what are the reasons? What are the things that are driving this kind of negative thinking? High prices for goods and services, supply chain problems, trade war in the U.S. Now, I believe that begun maybe about 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, but it is obviously playing on the minds of businesses. They believe that this is something, and they're looking forward, looking down the road, that this is something that is going to impact my ability to do business well. The economy will not improve that quickly. Some people are still saying, we need time, all right? Unstable foreign exchange, and fifthly, recent USA election results tie that to trade war in the US. So these are 2 factors, and people are saying, this is again the verbatim comments from businesses. We said, how do you feel about the economy? 12%, 16% said it's going to get worse. Why do you say it's going to get worse? We trap those verbatim comments, and here we put them in categories. High prices, trade war, economy will not improve that quickly, unstable foreign exchange, and the recent USA election mentioned. Despite that, there are a number of companies that plan to increase capital investment. And we've always been, over the last 7 years or thereabout, we've been plotting this particular piece of information to say, okay, which are the sectors that are likely to be increasing their capital investment. And we can see right now, very importantly, and probably just coincidentally, 71.4% is agriculture. Agriculture is the theme of our presentation today. 71.4% said we intend, of the farming and agriculture sector, says we intend to increase capital investment. And followed by that 65%, which is manufacturing, happily, 54% construction and installation, transportation, storage, and communication. We can see those the sectors that say they intend to increase capital investment, primarily agriculture. And agriculture has been pretty strong throughout, 64%, 60%, 71.4%. So it is appropriate that we're talking about agriculture primarily today, or singled out agriculture as a sector to focus more attention on. So we asked businesses, what are the factors that are impacting your decisions to undertake business expansion? Lack of funding, and this is up by 5 percentage points over the 4th quarter of 2024. High interest rates, cost of foreign exchange, high input costs, shortage of qualified skilled labor, lack of revenue, cash flow. We can see those factors that are impacting. and of course the financial institutions, and we'll look at that, and clearly it has a pretty important kind of bearing on what they do from here on. And we can see the changes over the period, but what are the key factors that are impacting decisions? Lack of funding, access to finance, high interest rates related, cost of foreign exchange related, high input costs, is all related to money, largely. Then we talk about labor and that kind of thing, crime. Crime plays a big factor in other areas, and when we look at this particular chart now, we say, well, what is the most critical issue to address urgently? And we can see from the statistics that are being shared with the general public over the last couple of months, 2 months, 3 months in particular, there has been a considerable emphasis on reducing crime. Crime is still the number one problem as far as the businesses are concerned, as far as consumers are concerned. That needs to be dealt with right now. And this is 43%, and it is up by 7 percentage points despite what has been obviously presented as a reduction in criminality and crime and murder. 43% say that crime and violence is the most critical issue to be addressed right now, and that's up by 7 percentage points on the fourth quarter, notwithstanding all that we hear. Stabilizing the dollar, corruption and favoritism, unemployment, inflation, and we can see exactly what are the sorts of policies that need to be implemented to be able to address the critical issues that are facing the country right now. Dealing with crime and violence is number one. Stabilizing the dollar, some significant way behind, corruption and favoritism, and unemployment and inflation. But how do you feel about, we pulled out again the largest single factor, do you anticipate crime and violence to be dealt with over the next 12 months? 44% of those businesses that we interviewed said we expect it to get worse. 29% said it was getting better, so that's a positive. And that's up by 14 percentage points. In other words, it's not inconsistent with the data that's been revealed to us. 29% said they expect the situation to get better, and that's up by 14 percentage points over the previous period. So there is a greater comfort level, but clearly not satisfactory by any means, because it is still the number one factor that is plaguing both consumers and businesses. What do you think should be done? Businesses take a different perspective to some extent in terms of what they see as the solutions to this big elephant in the room. 36% said better policing. 19% said more jobs for young people, not dissimilar to what the consumers are saying. More stringent penalties and fines for crime. Clamp down on corruption. Programs on the unemployed. We can see a mix of things which are not totally unrelated to what consumers feel should be done to address the crime and violence issue. So here it is, and I'm sure it should be shared with the policymakers, or should be, so that they can take a look at what they're doing and to see whether this is in line with what people expecting to be done, which is an important factor. One should listen to the people. So a question that we put fairly recently is, what sectors do you think will improve over the next 12 months? And the extreme confidence is to my right. I'm not quite sure what you're seeing over there, but the green bars talk to you in terms of where they expect things to get better. And the power supply electricity system, 32%. Small business sector, again, pretty much up there, 31%. The roadways, 20%, a lot of work being done. Police, 19%, they expect improvements, 19%. And therefore, we can see exactly what are the things that people are looking forward to as positive indicators of change within the society. Power supply, small business sector, roadways, the police, education sector, government, better water supply, public transport, and health. All right? So, again, businesses are moving very, very apace, so to speak, towards greater adaptation and use of technology in improving their business operations. So we asked them, what are the technology areas of interest are you embarking on? Are you going to be embracing to improve your business operation? Social media advertising, new customized software, electronic payment solutions, new hardware, virtual security systems, and again, these have hardly changed quarter to quarter. Social media advertising is very important. 46%, and we can see that that has gone up by 6 percentage points over the last quarter. And therefore, you can take a look at, these are the key factors. Solar is down to all the way down to 1%. Training of staff, and 16% are not going to do anything because they're already investing in technology. And 6% do not intend to invest. So there are a couple of naysayers and businesses that aren't technology keen. But here are the factors that they say they will be leaning on in terms of improving their business operations with regard to technology. So, very much like we did for the consumers, we asked a few questions on agricultural practices and the impact of agricultural practices on climate change. 16% of businesses believe that current agricultural practices have a positive impact on climate change. The consumers, remember, didn't really think so. 11% of businesses believe that current agricultural practices have no impact on climate change, and therefore there's a greater positive impact here than amongst the businesses. But almost half of the businesses believe that current agricultural practices have a negative impact on climate change, and therefore, to a large extent, you have a body of persons from the consumer level and from the business sector that believe that what is being done now in terms of agriculture has a negative impact on climate change. Again, 30%, almost a third, didn't know, didn't have enough information on which to base a position. But where clear answers were given, there's a higher incidence of persons who believe that current agricultural practices have a negative impact on climate change than those who believe it has a positive impact on climate change. Do you believe that businesses, Jamaican farmers, are ready to adopt environmentally sustainable practices? And here, businesses are negatively disposed in this particular situation. 56% don't believe that they're really equipped, and 13% said they're not at all equipped. So 70% are really not embracing this notion that businesses, Jamaican farmers, are ready to adopt environmental sustainable practices for their farming. Do you think there's any sponsorship or support program which is focused on local farming and agriculture? 64% said no. And we believe that this is an opportunity. All right, we believe this is an opportunity. 64%. 13% said yes, there's sponsorship program for local agriculture and farming. 23% said no, and therefore the large majority don't believe that there are any programs that are tailored or targeted to supporting agriculture using environmentally friendly means. Our businesses in Jamaica providing sufficient support to local farmers. 26% said yes, and 49% said no. We believe that all these are opportunities, and 26% didn't know. Are you willing to invest in initiatives that support local farming? 64% said yes. 21% said no. So there are opportunities, and there's an inclination to support local farming, and therefore you could marry the two, and you'd have a very positive outcome, or to have a very positive outcome. I think that's my last chart, and therefore here's the data. Very interesting quarter. Again, it almost goes without saying that every time we get to this point, we're in the field already, and we're anxiously awaiting the outcome of our field where we can do the validation and then present another report to the country. It is always an intriguing situation, a very exciting thing for us to anticipate what's going to be happening next. We have 90 quarters of data, and we look forward to the 91st. My pleasure.
some consumers' opinions on the effects of climate change. Could you show that now, please?
Yes, I think, but they would have to put in more time and more energy. They can, but it need more push. Even we do not have our local Irish for 12 months for the year, so anyway, take it we have. Yes, I think, but they would have to put in more time and more energy. They can, but it need more push. Even we do not have our local Irish for 12 months for the year, so anyway, take it we have foreign of a chip in. So if our Jamaican farmer is going to continually supply with, they would have to put in more energy, put in some more time. And we think we need more people to come up. But what we see with our farmer them, if you see them put in a crop and them come up and them buy one carrot, them buy one this, nobody else, everybody want to go foreign. Nobody don't want to stay here to continue, to make it roll.
Yes, we can, because we can do feasibility studies in order to get that kind of results. And the more you try, the more you get, and nothing try, nothing done. So if we try and try our best, we'll get good results.
Yes, I think Jamaican farmers can supply despite climate change, because in between the 23 years I've been doing breakfast, I survive on Jamaican stuff. Yam, banana, cantaloupe, cabbage, everything. So I know how to rotate, I know how to buy my breadfruit and roast and do them things there. My sweet potato, my Irish, my dasheen, everything.
Yes, we can, because they are experienced farmers and they know how to deal with the food crop, whichever weather comes around, and they would know how to survive. If they get support from the government and other stakeholders, they should be able to produce.
Yes, it can help the farmers, but as what you say, the price up and down. For the past 2 months, the market prices are very low. We have cabbage $100, $70, tomatoes at $50, scallion $200, $150, sweet pepper $200, onion $200. So the price for the past 2-3 months now is very good.
No. The problem is the international market, as I said. We import fertilizers, we import pesticides, we import insecticides, and I think that if we produce our own fertilizers, our own insecticides, I think the prices can go down. But right now, it's going to continue to go up.
I guess people always suggest to them to get extra dam. Say the country need extra dam. So I think the Prime Minister himself really focused on that, because he live in Jamaica too, don't it? And he must eat Jamaican products.
Well, every day new technology is developed. So if we try that, we can't stick to the same old. We have to try new elements, new stuff in order to improve. And you can use both the old method and the new method, and we can see how we can balance it in order to survive in the farming environment.
Well, what they need to do is put in things in play that when we reach the dry time, they can maintain. All right, we buy jump, put on our house, our yard, say when we water not there, we have a water jump. So that means we won't have to walk a big water. So what our farmer need to do is put in pipe things, so when we have drought, we can help ourselves. So it's only that bad. Don't.
Most definitely, because trust me, technology is the future. Right? Technology is the future. We can have smart drones using in our fields. So why not use technology? Because it is the future, right? You sit in your house, you know that the plants will be watered by 6 o'clock. You don't have to get up out of your bed. You just take up your phone and set the timer and your drone up, water the field. So technology, definitely.
I think them support overseas to come one of the time when we there town sell. Them say price smart have things cheaper than we. Me have a place me that do the order and them they stop from me because like them that call down here me I sell Irish $200. Price me I have Irish I sell like 180, 150. But we get support.
I think so if we put in enough work. Because when you put in the work, you're going to get results. And that's how I am reaching local businesses. You know, I am a farmer, DG Fresh Fruits, and I farm bananas and cabbages, and I supply to, you know, other outlets, you know, to try and reach them. And I'm just a young man, so if others put their hands together, I'm sure that we can, you know, knock out the international competition.
I think they should do more, but me, professionally, me always support them. I always support them. People who raise chicken at them home, I support them.
They should do more because sometimes there are preferences and sometimes I don't think they want to share the profit or share the market itself. And we should be our brother's keeper in times like these.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask our panelists to join me. Mr. Anderson, please join me. Neil, Peter, Alicia, please join me on the platform here. Thank you very much. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. All right. Just general question first to the panelists here, the three panelists. Based on what you saw in the results, with consumer confidence soaring and business confidence sort of flattening out and declining, as a business person, I start with the lady, Alicia. What is this your experience? Is the survey of the consumers and businesses, is that in keeping with what you're experiencing in your business?
Well, from a consumer perspective, that was a little startling. But as Don shared, it definitely is a testament to a big entrepreneurial push in the island. We had some preliminary discussion. We were talking about so many different new jobs emerging that we don't really capture or consider true income earners for the household, but they really are. I mean, this wave of digital earning and influencers and people who rely on, maybe it's a new way to get remittance through online versus, you know, the traditional pass-through of monies. From a business confidence level, it's not surprising what's happening with our neighbors in North America. They're shooting from the hip. There's a lot of uncertainty. It's difficult to plan, as well as, you know, interest rates haven't really come down, and so there's a tightness in the market, especially with our small to medium-sized businesses. They just have a struggle with accessing capital, and you can't really grow without access to funds. So.
Okay, thank you for that. David, same question. Have the results of the business and consumer confidence indices reflected what you're experiencing in your business?
Yeah, I think the consumer index definitely reflects what we've been seeing. Some of the data is a bit surprising, as Alicia said, but also, you know, that non-traditional income is really, I think, part of that influence that's happening where people are not relying on maybe traditional methods of earning, and they're having supplemental earning as well. So definitely seeing that, also seeing, you know, in our consumption, what Don said about people saying that they're, over 70% of people are saying that things have gotten more expensive. And you definitely see that in businesses owned by Grace Kennedy, such as Hilo, where the spend per purchase is being factored and influenced by that.
Thank you very much. Peter, same question. What are you seeing?
So I align fully with the sentiments from the business sector. I think Don was spot on with the feedback from the business sector. I'm aligned with that. I am surprised of the very high confidence in consumer spending. And I actually have a different suggestion. One of the suggestions was the entrepreneurs, but I am concerned that could be, not saying it is, that it could be a reflection of the underground economy. And why I say that is that when we enjoyed the post-COVID boom, and your chart showed that the business sector in 22 and 23 was off the charts. We experienced that in our business, and talking to my distribution partners and others, one of the sentiments, one of the explanations was not just the pent-up spending power, but that the underground market was shattered because of supply chain. The underground market wasn't getting their normal supply. So a lot of that gain in the formal sector was because the goods and services were being sold through the formal channels. This is worrying to me that maybe their underground economy is taking back its place. And so, you know, obviously there's money out there if there's consumer confidence, but I don't think any of your business surveys are with the underground business people. So that, to me, that's one of the explanations of the imbalance between why is the business sector not as confident as a consumer. And I think it's because you're not interviewing some of the business sector that's supplying those consumers.
And don't really know. Right, right. Very interesting. Thank you for that. It really is an anomaly in this case. Very surprising. But with job prospects being what they are, we have a low unemployment level. And probably the low unemployment level is because those who you seek to employ are not applying for the jobs. So those who are applying are underqualified or not meeting your standards, which again would point to the fact that people don't want to have a boss anymore. They want to be the boss. So they're working for themselves. Because with no clear evidence of a decline right now in consumer confidence, it must mean something. Persons still earning, could be, like you said, the underground economy, but we don't know that. But using the statistical information that we have, it would appear that persons who would normally be employed in the sectors of the economy are working in those sectors now for supplying goods and services to the sector rather than being a supplier, rather than being employed in that sector. So it points to a lot of things. But one question that I really would want to get the...
We're probably looking for one factor that is driving this consumer.
It's not one.
It may not be one, because there's a marginal increase in the expectation for jobs, you know. There's a marginal increase, and that is one factor. But you're right. There's no question that, even anecdotally, even when we do our debriefing, there are people saying that, boy, what is driving this? You know, people are trying to get into things that can earn them some money, so they're having 2 jobs and 3 jobs, you know? And this is what is feeding that entrepreneurial thing. But there is a marginal increase in job expectation, which is, again, one of the factors that I think we should think about, and which is probably driving this, this increased consumer confidence.
Right. All right. Thank you. Certainly, prices are a factor, input costs. What steps have you taken, or would you suggest, Alicia first, in diversifying your suppliers to reduce the dependency on a single source for raw materials?
So at CB Group, obviously, we have a number of divisions. We're first and foremost a poultry company, but we pride ourselves on being more than that. And a lot of the agricultural inputs in terms of imports will be predicated on hatching eggs and grains. There are maybe 3 large grain growers in the world, Brazil being the largest exporter, the US in Midwest being second. Traditionally, I would argue both companies get from the US Midwest largely because of the size of ships and scheduling, the reliability of getting the grains. So you're not just working with just-in-time supply and you know, raw material. Brazil, their boats are too big. So do we look and try to diversify from there? Absolutely, but there are also some conditions that we just can't change. Hatching eggs, you know, there's a big discussion globally now about highly pathogenic avian influenza, which is a big deal. So we are looking at different areas to source eggs, as well as putting a breeder operation on the ground so we have more control. But again, majority of the eggs come from the US, but before it would largely be Georgia. Now we have to say, okay, work with your supplier, put down a flock in Texas, put down a flock elsewhere, so you can diversify the geography and risk mitigation for disease. So our business is a little different because when all those things come in, we manufacture and grow, and we still have to consider all the constraints with disease on the ground here as well.
Right, thank you. Mr. Cromwell, same question, except that I know you of your supply and you have problems with inconsistencies in that regard. How do you diversify your supply of raw materials?
Well, two sides. So we do have certain raw materials that we have to import. A lot of our packaging, for example, we use a lot of glass for things like bottles, jars, bottles for our tropical rhythms juices, jars for our jerk seasoning. So from that aspect, we try to buy from multiple sources, from Asia, from the Middle East, from Central and South America. So we can pull from multiple sources as we need. On the farming side, locally, we have spread our footprint in terms of where we have contract farmers. So I think there are only 2 parishes, which is St. Andrew and Hanover, that we don't have contract farmers. So we are spreading our risk across the country. So if the east has a weather event, for example, we can shift to the west and vice versa. So that's how we are managing it. And also what we grow where, whereas there are certain areas where Scotch bonnet is growing better, for example. We're getting better yields in those areas. So it's really identifying those factors and utilizing them.
Okay, Peter, same question. The supply inputs. How do you diversify to sort of reduce the dependence on regional or a single source of raw materials?
Well, our mandate in our purchasing department is to ensure that we have at least 2 good suppliers of any one ingredient. And if you can get more than that, fine. But we, at Tradewinds, we're really a farming operation that's become a manufacturer and of brands. And we try to backward integrate as much as possible for stabilizing our supply chain. Like blowing our own bottles is something we've started to do. Not all of our bottles, but we invested in that, so we have a little more stability there in packaging supply. On the farming side, the citrus industry has been badly devastated by disease. So unfortunately, we no longer have a network of farmers to buy citrus from. But now that we've gone into the dairy business, we have quite a network of small and medium dairy farmers that we buy from. And the goal is to try and expand that and encourage more farmers to get into producing milk for us.
Okay, thank you. So that statistic that showed 71% of the persons in the agricultural sector looking to invest certainly is true in your case, in the fact that you're going more into cattle now, et cetera, et cetera. You believe that is the way to go in terms of diversifying your...
Absolutely. I mean, we have been at Tradewinds, we've been a monocrop, which is citrus, for decades. After experiencing the second disease to wipe us out in my career, I said, well, we have to diversify the farm. So we haven't given up on citrus, but citrus is going to only represent one of our crops. We've diversified in pineapples. We've diversified into dairy production. But I don't know if I'm going to digress here, but I think the person that captured everything properly was Munchon's market, that vendor. I think she summed it up nicely in that she supports Jamaican farmers, but little import have to run because they're not consistent. And I don't know if that's going to be a further question, but I have a lot to say about that.
Well, that is the next question, sir, but I'll give it to Mr. Cromwell first. What is required really to facilitate effective import substitution? How can local production and imports sort of peacefully coexist? How do we do that?
Well, I think for local production, there are three core things. One is use of science and technology in our agricultural endeavors to ensure that we're getting maximum efficiencies and yields, so that we can be globally competitive in terms of our production levels, etc. Two is control storage, in that either cold storage or temperature control storage. So for example, tomatoes, there's always a glut and a famine every year for tomatoes. And when you have a hurricane, it's even worse. If you can store tomatoes for a longer time, you can produce enough tomatoes to supply the local market, but you need to have that storage capacity in order to do that. And there is some private and public investment that's happening right now that should be starting to support things like that. So things are happening. Maybe it needs to happen a little bit faster, but it is happening.
Okay. Alicia, a similar question in that, I mean, diversification is key. How much of your business is supply of feed, for example, something like that? Are you doing that internally, any of that internally, or are you still relying on outside inputs too?
So years ago, decided in order to truly be successful, we had to become vertically integrated. So we manufacture animal feeds and sell not only through our integration, but also to small farmers across the island as well as regionally. And that has been a big game changer, especially in COVID, because animals still had to eat. Exactly. So we look at diversification from different aspects. I mean, not all our goods are consumer in terms of, we're not going out to the average person to buy chick feed, broiler feed. But yeah, for sure. As I said, we started our flagship as a poultry company. We're now the largest producer of pigs in Jamaica, as well as table eggs. So definitely looking at other opportunities.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. You spoke about the technology now. Is greenhouse farming really a realistic solution to our problems in terms of inconsistency in the supply due to climate risks? And greenhouse farming and inputs come at a significant capital cost in some instances. How can we integrate this so that it doesn't burden your whole final cost to the consumer? And is greenhouse farming part of your own DNA at this time?
We're not doing any greenhouse farming right now, and I'm not saying greenhouse farming is the solution, but the employment of modern technology is absolutely the solution. Whether you need greenhouse or not, it will be dependent on the crop or your location. But we have to deploy all the latest technology. And where I've learned this is now going into pineapples. The learning curve has been very steep, but it is very, very intense agriculture. The prices have been very good and very encouraging. And what it is now, the goal that we now have, which we're not there yet, but we can be there, is to have pineapples available 52 weeks of the year. That requires investment in technology, and I think is, another year or two, we will achieve that, where every week you go into the store, you're going to find our pineapples. And I think that same model has to be put across all the crops. You heard Munchie, or whatever her name was, saying the Irish run out, and when the Irish run out, the imports have to run. But that is also one of our big problems. I advocate that the producers of any particular crop should also control the importation. The licensing regime for bringing in any crop, the farmers must get it, nobody else. Not the concrete farmer and the briefcase farmer in Kingston. It must be the real farmers, must be the ones bringing in the Irish or whatever is short. And that's what will, I think, go a long way to encourage more sustainable agriculture.
Go ahead.
The farming community puts in all of the sweat equity and makes investments, weather the storm. And then if there's something that upends the market, they get tossed to the side. And in all other industries, that's not typically the case. So I agree with Peter 150% there.
Okay, one of my final questions would have been, government policy and trade agreements and its impact on you're able to source raw materials. But since you bring it up, let's just take that question now. What legislative changes would you require on a more permanent basis? Apart from, you just mentioned one, Mr. Cromwell, I don't know if you have any comment on that, which would sort of level out the supply issues which we're having.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of legislation, I think we need to do things a bit faster. One of our primary needs right now in terms of like hot pepper production is having good seed stock. And a lot of times challenges of we'll find where we can get good seed stock from, but then getting that through the approval process can take too long where you missed an entire crop because you can't get in those seeds. So that whole process needs to be sped up if we plan to be competitive.
Okay, that is a clear statement that our bureaucratic business process needs to sort of improve and help us to be more just in time. Let's talk about workforce now. The development of the sector is, we rely heavily, more heavily now on technology for greater efficiency, but we still need the labor. What can you do, or what are you doing to sort of encourage the participation of others who have their own entrepreneurial ambitions? In your particular industry, Alicia, I know everybody who works for you probably have a chicken farm at home too. So how do you encourage and enable and maintain the workforce? Peter was talking about one of his employees who's left and become quite successful and boasting about it. So given the whole drive for efficiency, to combat climate change, to utilize technology, there's a human element that still has to be there. And the agricultural sector, the tourism sector are large employers in this country. What do you have to do to keep them?
Well, internally, obviously, we just have to continually train and expose them to practices outside of Jamaica. I think too often we consider agriculture as just this rudimentary backyard thing and don't really look at it as agro-business. We recently launched our air chill processing facility at Hill Run, St. Catherine, and it was a real game changer to even the young person because they saw agriculture in a new way. And they don't feel like they just need to aspire to be a doctor and a lawyer anymore. They can look at different jobs that work within this industry. We hire quite a few veterinarians. That's not an easy skill to train for or find nowadays. So, how do we combat that? Working closely with government, deepening public-private partnership. We work closely with CASE, creating scholarship opportunities and internship opportunities, just again, to really expose people and train them. The truth is, you can't know if you like something or have an interest if you're not exposed to it. And that's something that we really try to do, give people the opportunity to see agriculture and bring sustainability to life in our operations in hope that we can recruit them and entice them to see this as a true viable career path.
Okay, Peter, same question. How do you keep your workforce happy?
Well, pay them well, profit share, constant training. But we're also using drones now too, so we employing drone operators, which is quite exciting for them. But I think an area that is often overlooked is tractor drivers. And I've spoken to Dintil Technical School, which is right next door to us, and I told the principal, I said, you need a tractor driving course, and we will hire them all. And it's when you buy a $80,000 or $100,000 piece of equipment, a tractor with enclosed air control and a spray system, you can't put an uneducated, untrained driver in there. It's like a pilot. Mm-hmm. I need a pilot. Mm-hmm. So I say, let's can change the word. Don't call it tractor driver. Call it, I don't know what, tractor pilot, agricultural pilot. But we need to make it more sexy. But we need anybody that says they can't get a job in Jamaica, they don't want one, or they're not putting themselves through the exposure to be trained, because we're constantly looking for skilled people.
Right. Mr. Cromwell, your question again, similar. Do you supply any of the raw materials to potential suppliers, young farmers who might need seeds or whatever it is, just to get that start, to encourage them to continue to, progress in the ecosystem?
Yes, so one of the things that we've started this year is supplying seed stock to the farmers, and that's because for multiple reasons, but one of the major reasons is in order for the farmers to get the yield that we need them to get so they can provide us the produce at the price that we need it to be competitive, because 93% of everything that Grace AgroProcess produces is exported. So we have to be globally competitive with our pricing. So that's one of the key things. Another thing that we are actually just starting this week is utilizing organic waste from our factories to produce organic fertilizers and insecticides. And we'll be providing those at minimal cost to the farmer network as well. So that also has benefit for an environment in that it's an organic product, as well as reutilizing waste that we would have normally dumped. So it has multiple advantages.
Okay. The other question, in this climate risk environment that we work in, supply, consistency of supply. You know that at some point, just in time is where we need to go, but at some point you have to have some inventory, which you can lean on when there's a disaster, whether it is drought, hurricane, whatever. But that comes at a cost. How you balance that, Alicia? Because you can't have 25% of the countries, or 3 months of the country's meat supply sitting frozen,
not in cold storage.
not in cold storage at these energy costs. So where's the balance? Because I know, it is inevitable that this year we're going to have the same issues we've always had, which is drought, and in another 2 or 3 months, the other side of the coin. And you want to be able to reduce our dependence on emergency imports, for that matter. So how do we do that and maintain efficiency, keeping the prices, as people mentioned in the survey, that investing in climate-related support for agriculture is fine, but we're not paying for it. So how do you strike that balance?
It's something that we have to assess weekly, because again, in livestock, you can't tell the animals to stop growing and stop eating, and it takes at least 2-3 months to really sort of turn in poultry. And let's not even talk about pigs, that's another 9-10 months. So it's not so simple, there's a lot of planning involved. As it relates from just the import of the grain, we are increasing our storage, in silos and what have you, so we can hold more raw material to be able to make the feeds that are required across the island, and hope that we can hold enough inventory to satisfy the market, especially when you see spikes in tourism and demand through food service, that we have the ability to actually service the market, but also through our livestock support teams on our Newport mill sides to treat and teach the farmers so they too can increase their yields and contribute. So the reliance is not only on us. A lot of people don't actually understand, but the small farmers in Jamaica actually have a larger market share than CB.
Right.
And in some instances JV, so they're a very, very important player. So they too have to, be a part of the conversation. But it is tricky, it's a delicate balance, because as I said, you're dealing with hatching eggs, you're dealing with, broiler feeds, meats, so it's not so simple. We unfortunately can't bottle and put down for 6-7 months.
Business continuity planning, Peter, same question, because you have to strike that balance. We need to be resilient, we need to be self-sufficient, even in these climate risk related activities. So where do you draw the line there without jeopardizing your business continuity plan? Because 2 months without supply can severely impact you.
Well, I don't have the answer for the hurricanes. But, in terms of under normal growing conditions, irrigation is key. And we have deployed irrigation in all our high value crops now. And as I've told the Minister of Agriculture, I will not be growing any high value crop without irrigation. But you cannot produce consistently without it. The weather patterns have changed so dramatically over the last 30 years that although we have the same amount of rainfall in a given 12-month period, the distribution is way off. So the short answer is irrigation is one of the technologies that have to be deployed to have sustainable production.
David?
Yeah, I agree with Peter completely in terms of irrigation. One of the things that we've been working on as well is crop timing. We're in working with Met Office and people like Mona Geoinformatics, looking at weather patterns and seeing where those weather patterns change. In 2022, we worked on a project with the scallion farmers, scallion being the main ingredient in jerk seasoning. And what we realized is their traditional growing season was at the end of the year, October through to Christmas. But the areas where scallion was growing, they were having heavy rains at that period, which was unusual. When we looked at the weather patterns, we realized that the weather patterns they used to experience in that period now occurred in January through March. And we worked with the farmers to change when they planted, when they harvested. And it resulted in record production in 2022. So it is possible.
Okay.
Generally, not limited to crops, is controlled environments. So on the CB side, all of our new growers and even our past growers integrated, they have to now introduce solid sidewall houses. So many of you may be traversing through the countryside and you don't see as many of the curtain sidewall houses, very open, very simple looking. These are category 4 and 5 spec buildings. So when you would have had the devastation in some of the areas where our farms are last year with the hurricane, we weren't upended because we had these new buildings with control environment. Everything chips in, monitor, solar, you click a number, it monitors everything, waters. So it's not limited to crops. It's control environments for all agriculture is really the future.
Okay. All right, GK Capital is here. So the question now, access to capital. All of what we've spoken about, the technologies, the sustainability of supply, etc., will require capital. Are you satisfied that we have everything we need in that regard, or what else from the perspective of capital access to give our sponsors some business opportunities? would you recommend are the input costs being completely properly financed through the capital markets? What is your thought on what is required to give your businesses more ease of access to capital for your development?
I think there needs to be a better understanding of our business. That's the first thing, because they always talk about risk. There's risk in anything, but if you have a true understanding of what it is we're doing and trying to achieve, I think that's the first thing. Also, knowing that there needs to be better interest rates. I can go to the bank and get a car tomorrow, but let me bring a business proposal for something in agribusiness or agriculture, and I think it goes through at least 55 checks, or 45. I think a better appreciation of agriculture and better, easier access to capital, and especially when you see more advanced businesses going into those control environments, because it does mitigate the risk, so I think that's a
Okay.
big one.
David?
Yeah, to Alicia's point, when I look at access to capital, I think we need to have more diverse options. Yes, better rates are always good, but I think flexibility in rates is maybe even more important, in that different crops require different times. It's a 100-day crop, right? So you may not need financing for a year. You may need financing for 120 days. but they may be able to pay the annual rate, right? So that's one. And then we need to look at it's somewhat difficult to service that debt, right? Things like receivables factoring, which I know is being looked at by a lot of financial institutions now, of, if a farmer has a contract to...
That's a good idea, GK Capital. Peter?
At Tradewinds, we don't have a problem with access to capital, but based on the interest rate environment, we've just stopped borrowing. And it's nothing to do with GK or the financial sector, it's just the way things are globally. So we always, for the last 10, 15 years, we've been reinvesting 75% of our profit back into the business. And when financial markets were more attractive, we would borrow money to accelerate expansion or do acquisitions. But since the last year and a half, we've just been spending our own money.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, the done survey showed clearly that both on the business and the consumer side, the elephant in the room continues to be security. We have risks. We're speaking here today about climate risk, and we're talking about business risk, supply chain risk, security. How is that impacting your balance sheet? Are you spending more, less, or in between on securities? From a security standpoint, was trickling down to the businesses who are members of the chamber. So the question, how is it been in Alicia in your business?
Well, it actually made a note earlier to ask Don about that crime statistic, because is it speaking to crime as in petty theft as well, robbery, or just murder? Because I know it's been very topical in the news that crime is down, but largely murders. But I would argue that theft is huge. I mean, from predial larceny right into your business, and it's almost like an entire crime syndicate operating. Cost of security has in fact increased, especially with the recent minimum wage increases and what have you. I mean, we've been moving towards more monitoring through cameras and what have you, but still, it's a massive line item for every business, and then the collusion, and it is a problem. I mean, theft of fuel, theft of product, trucks getting hijacked en route to make deliveries. I mean, that definitely continues. And we saw, I would say, an increase, a higher incidence probably leading up to the holidays last year.
Yeah. Peter, same thing question.
I think predial larceny is one of the biggest disincentives to agriculture. I mean, it really is. We've been saying this for decades, and it's not getting any better. We have deployed drone surveillance, tried to keep it covert. It only lasted about a month or less until everybody knew we were using drones. And I'll tell you a story now. About a month ago, my security supervisor called me just after dark, asking me if the security drone was in such and such area. I said, I don't know. I called the drone operator. He goes, no, I parked half an hour ago. It turned out that the thieves were using drones to monitor our security.
Wow.
That's the level we're gone to.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's a very, very serious problem. And not just predial larceny, but crime in general. Business opportunities have come up where you can buy this business in this new area. And I say, boy, I'm not really going to go expose myself to extortion in a town that I've never been in. And I'm just not doing it. Bogwalker Linstead is fine for me.
Comfort zone. David, any response to that in terms of security?
Yeah, I mean, predial larceny, as Peter said, has always been a perennial issue. For us, well, we don't do the farming ourselves, but our farmers do have some of that issue. Quite a bit of our farmers are in close-knit communities, so they're somewhat protected because everybody knows everybody in that area, and when they see an outsider, they kind of,
raise an alarm.
Raise alarms. But there is definitely a fact to that, and there has been a shortage of Scotch bonnet over the last year, and several farmers have lost fields where fields have just been raided overnight, where they've lost an entire field of 20,000 to 30,000 pounds within 24 hours, which is significant hit to their business.
Right. All right.
When you lose your crop to a hurricane, it
one
hurts.
thing.
But when you lose your crop to a thief, it is so demotivating. More so than being flooded out or blown over with breeze.
Especially if there's an internal collusion. Yeah. All right. We're getting close to wrap-up time. So two more questions really. What sort of what recommendation, or if you touched on it a little bit, Peter, from a legislative capacity, would you all support Mr. McConnell's theory that we really need a level playing field from a legislative standpoint, whether it is import duties, whatever it is? What would we require? Peter maybe can expand on it here, from the government to sort of bring more attractiveness to the business of agriculture and sustainable agriculture at this time, because climate risks are not going away, unfortunately. So what can the government do to sort of boost?
Well, I'm not an advocate of excessive legislation or regulation. Far from that. But I do feel, as I mentioned earlier, that the farmers that are producing a crop for a reasonable percent of the year but aren't able to do it all year round, they should be the ones, through a system to be established. I don't have the answer to the system, but just in concept, that the importing of potatoes should be done by the potato farmers. The importing of chicken should be done by the chicken farmers. And I have that experience from the milk industry. The dairy board is who issues permits for importing powdered milk. So although we're only supplying 25% of our needs from local production, my goal is to eliminate the importation of powder. The system still needs to be tested. When that happens, are they going to stop importing powder? If they don't, you'll certainly hear a lot of noise from me.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I think in addition to the legislation, it's also about support, right? Because soil health is extremely important to the farming community. In some of our competitors within even the region, countries in Central America, other countries in the Caribbean, such as Dominican Republic, you can get your soil testing done by a government lab within 48 hours, and you can change your nutritional plan according to what that data is telling you. It takes us a lot longer to get that done because you have to go through a private lab. Sometimes those results have to go overseas to be analyzed and come back to you. So those are some of the supports that are needed to create that infrastructure, and especially to the small farmers. Obviously, we can support our farmer network with those things because we have the global contacts to get those things done. But when it comes to a small farmer that's farming 5-10 acres, how do they have access to that information that helps them to be more productive? And that's where I think that the government needs to play a larger role in getting those support activities more robust and more readily available.
Right. Alicia, similar question for you, but I think I can lead your answer a little bit by talking about, not illegal imports, but undocumented imports. And what can we do from a legislative standpoint to sort of assist the poultry industry particularly with some more consistency and at efficient and affordable pricing?
I think better planning, public-private partnership planning. I think a lot of the time we are brought to the table when there is an issue and after the fact. And, we don't talk about the long term and the implications up front, true Jamaican fashion. Separately, the support, especially from research and development. I mean, we've actually just gotten into a partnership with Devonish Nutrition out of the UK to introduce the first tropical growing broiler house in the Caribbean, because all of our expertise comes largely from areas that have window. And obviously our climate is different, and to understand how things work, to be able to then share that with the smaller farmer. So we can bear the brunt of the hit. But as it relates to the import of stuff and illegal, our borders are not policed the way they should be. and we work in a place relying on gentlemen's agreements or people to be honest after even receiving a permit. I don't know, we're in an era where, you know, everything needs to be convenience and access with trade, and so you have AEO, security, all of this, which allows people even more ways to do things. So that's a discussion bigger than this panel.
Quite. All right, the final question. The climate risks that we face also affect our road network. A lot of capital has been spent on improving our road distribution networks. You can't have a warehouse in central, west, and east, so you have to transport goods. How has the road networks, development of the road networks, affected you first, Peter, in terms of the getting goods to the consumer?
The toll road, we use the toll road north, south, and east, west. All our trucks, and we put the e-pass on them. Yes, that's a very big cost, but both time from delivery time has cut down and wear and tear on the trucks has cut down. So I think that's a very big improvement to distribution in the country. And there's a lot more that needs to be done. Some of those towns along the north coast and elsewhere, most of the north coast need more bypass roads, because you get on the toll road and get to Ocherius in no time at all, but then try get through try get to past St. Anne's Bay and past Priory, and that's a different story. But no, a big improvement in the road network, but still a lot to be done on the regular roads, on the parochial roads. And I mean, the government's spending some decent money there now, but it needs to be kept up.
Maintenance. David?
Yeah, I mean, the toll roads have made a significant difference. Grace's Agro Processors Division has 2 factories, one in St. Elizabeth, one in Clarendon. The St. Elizabeth is a raw material factory. Clarendon is the finished product factory, and the transit between those two has gotten a lot better. Whereas it's now about an hour and 15 minutes between the two, where it used to be, it was well over 2 hours to transit between those two facilities. So it's really gotten better there. And yes, I agree with Peter that a lot more has to be done with the parochial roads, in particular the farm roads. I know there is a project ongoing for that now, but still a lot more to be done. And the better the road, the better product is coming out, because when the road is bad, all that vibration, all that shaking ends up affecting the product. So it's all interlinked.
Okay. Building supply chain resilience. Alicia, your comment on your distribution network, given the extent of the road work that has been done, any benefits so far?
Oh, absolutely. I echo these gentlemen's statements. I mean, there's been significant improvement, but there's a far way to go, especially in the urban areas and areas that aren't traditionally urban. But the traffic, though, I don't know how we combat the traffic, because even with those improvements and, you know, traversing from one area to the next might be shorter here, and then you spend 2 hours and you miss a delivery window. So the traffic, I don't know how we deal with the traffic around town, especially in the major cities. It's really affecting distribution, especially when you're transporting baby chicks or live animals.
Yes, that's a problem. All right, I think we've had a very robust discussion, and this topic is so important to the future of manufacturing and agriculture in particular that we could spend even more time on it, but you know, we have to get back to work. So, and Martha is here. I didn't ask Martha for a comment from her neck of the woods because I know she's adequately represented up here as well. But thank you all for participating. Certainly, again, thanks at the very top to our sponsor, GK Capital Management Limited, to Chanel for her opening remarks, to Don for another eye-opening presentation. My phone is already ringing. So, and yeah, you're going to get a lot of phone calls from the media today about the surge in consumer confidence. So thank you very much, Don. Excellent, as usual. In depth. We have 24 plus years now of data. So, you know, any of you business strategists can call the chamber and you can be a subscriber to this data. And I'm sure Larry will soon start to apply some AI predictive tools to the 24 years of data, which will give us some more tools to assist Don in verifying and authenticating his projections. To David Neil Cromwing, Operating Executive, GK Foods and Services Manufacturing Division. It was very important that we have somebody from manufacturing in GK here representing, because you guys are on the ground as one of our sponsors, and you have subject matter experts on the ground. So I'm very happy that you're able to make it. Mr. Mack, a pleasure having you here, sir. I think you really added a lot of valuable information, and I hope that the businesses and entrepreneurs out there listen to all three of these panelists and took word from them on how you need to manage your own businesses going forward with the supply chain challenges ahead. Alicia, same to you. Thank you for being here. I know you're not one who likes to sit down in traffic, so so thank you all. Thank you to the Courtly for the kind accommodation, and we wish you all a very productive day. Enjoy the Easter week, and see you shortly in the next quarter. Don, all the best. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day.